Sometimes you really own your learning when you have made all the mistakes and then found a way that worked for you. So today's prompt for World Watercolor Month is arch, and I don't know where to take it, to tell you the truth. Arch is a really great noun. Lots of things arch. I was thinking about trees that arch over our heads. I was thinking about the arch of the sky, and how basically that makes every landscape an arch, which I think is kind of a cool idea. And then I was also thinking about Santa Fe. I thought, well, maybe I could find a stone arch to paint. I was in Santa Fe in April, and so I flipped through my photos and I didn't find a stone arch, but I did find this tree. And it's one of my favorite photographs from my trip to Santa Fe. You can see there's a little bit of snow on the ground, early spring. Late spring, I don't know, it was April. And that's early spring where I come from in northern BC. And so in the next 30 minutes or so, I want to just play with the arching branches of this gorgeous, I think it's a cedar, anyhow, beautiful dead tree. And, you know, it's in context. It's got the lovely framing of green and rust and that soft, hazy background. So there's a lot of things going on that can help contribute to the story of this painting. And so we're just going to play with it and see where we get in half an hour. Today I am going to be using a direct painting approach. I'm not going to start with any pencil sketching, even though I have a pencil really close by. But I think instead I'm just going to work with a large brush, and I have this flat brush, which is a little bit of a crisp brush, which ordinarily I wouldn't choose for the beginning of a painting. I like a softer brush to kind of lay in a soft passage of color, but we'll use it anyhow. It's a Da Vinci 20 millimeter Forte modeler brush. So let's just get in using some color that was already in the palette. Let's put some ground down for our tree to sit on. And under paintings, with a 30-minute sketch, you actually don't want to work in a lot of layers. So I actually don't want to work too wet. I want to be mindful of the fact that I want things to be able to dry so I can build shape on top of it and get some detail into the scene. So let's just kind of create some spaces for shapes to be placed. This is a gray that was mixed for a previous painting, and maybe it will work for suggesting some of my initial tree. That's one thing I like about the modeler brush. Usually I do that later in the painting, is put in some of these interesting lines. Kind of working right now though. Maybe we can get some of those early shapes, branch shapes positioned, and then build on top of it. That could be cool. One of the soft greens I loved using for our trip to Santa Fe, and if you ever want to travel and paint with me, I teach I have quite a few travel workshops lined up right now, and I would encourage you to check that out. I'll put a link in the description below the video, or you can go to my website, angelafehr.com. This is a Zoisite Genuine. It is one of my very favorite kind of gray greens, and I don't know if most people would call it a green. It looks green right now, actually. So, but it comes down as a gray green. You can soften it and get a gray. It also has a ton of texture in it, so it really gives some really beautiful textures as well. So there's a lot of reasons to like Zoisite Genuine. And some of these grayed out colors, Zoisite Genuine is one of them. Lavender, actually from Daniel Smith, is another one. Kind of a subdued color that works really well. I love having some really quick to grab neutrals in my palette. I'm kind of liking this. This is a great beginning for me. So I've just some zigzaggy strokes. I've carved around some of my, this actually is a background bush kind of tucked behind my cedar tree, if that is a cedar. We're going to call it that. I think somebody called them junipers. And where I live, junipers only get shrub size, so I just thought that was really interesting. I'm touching in some green gold right now. just to brighten up some of my greens, get a little bit of freshness in there. And you can see how the paint has soaked into the watercolor paper. This is 100% cotton watercolor paper, Kilimanjaro Paintbook. All the supplies will be linked in the description below the video. And so that gives me some warm colors. And now we're going to start thinking about, actually I'm going to paint my background in. We've got some hazy kind of hills in the background, and they're kind of a gray-blue lavender mixed in with my other shadow color over here. Should give me a kind of soft color that will work as a background. And maybe it seems strange to you that I'm painting my background this late, because I've already got a lot of foreground is what I started with. And it's just remember, when you're learning watercolor, there is always more than one way to paint something. I spent a lot of time feeling like I was doing things wrong because I would read books that would say, in watercolor, you always work light to dark, you always work, back to front kind of thing. You have a certain order in which you do things. And I didn't follow rules very well. And that's okay. You find your way to do it. Sometimes you can learn a lot through learning the rules. Sometimes those rules will save you some mistakes, making mistakes over and over again and not knowing why your painting's not working. But on the other hand, sometimes you really own your learning when you have made all the mistakes and then found a way that worked for you. It's your way, and you will never forget it. So I think that there's something really beautiful about that. Okay, so I like this as an underpainting. Let's just take a look. We've got some really great line, which kind of gives us the beginning of our tree, which I love. We've got our landscape kind of in the foreground, which has really gotten muted and soft. We're going to want to punch that up a little bit to more rusty colors, put some grasses in there maybe. We don't really see those distant hills very well. I could tweak that a little bit. I've got kind of gray blue sky, but I could put in that little line to just suggest, hills in the background. And then it's going to kind of fade away, or fade towards green maybe. Mix a little zoisite into that blue hill color, and then let it fade. Dab my brush so I can kind of guide some of those colors down without adding more water to the page. And then let's just kind of blend it into what's already on the page. When you're working with putting your background in after you've put some of your foreground stuff in, you always want to look at how it's kind of integrating itself into the painting. And sometimes you got to tweak that a little bit. Okay, I've got a beautiful color from Rockwell that I'm going to use at this stage to start to develop my tree. And I'm using a round brush now. I've gone to a number 10 round. And this lapis brown from Rockwell it's a brown with blue in it. So right now I'm just going to see if I can't find some of the shadows in the tree. Spaces behind the tree that are in shadow. And then we'll pull some line out. See if we can't develop our tree in that way. So we've got a shadow shape, and then kind of integrate it a little bit. It's wet brush so I can kind of blend and soften. And this lapis brown from Rockwell, it has the blue undertones, which is really gorgeous. When you let this color run, that's when the advantage of working with these self-evolving colors is how Rockwell terms it, because as they dry, with a little water in them, a little flow, let's let some of it flow down the page over here. You start to see the qualities of those colors kind of come to life. The undertone of blue, some of those little rusty hues, and any texture as well. happens as you introduce water. So if you've purchased self-evolving colors and you tend to work with a very dry brush and you're wondering why it's not doing beautiful things for you, that's why. You got to let your color flow. Open it up to some surprise. It's a little bit less control. Changing brushes once again. This time I want to just work with, this sketch is coming together so quickly actually. This is a paintbrush made by Levinson Paintbrushes. Tracy Levinson hand makes these brushes, and he calls them the Ollivander's Magic Wands for artists, and they kind of are. You can see the beautiful bamboo handle and the fine point that I'm getting so I can paint my branches. I'm going to use, let's bring in a little bit of another color here in a second. The other thing I like about these Levinson brushes is when my brush starts to dry, often the little hairs in it start to split apart. And so I start to get the comb-like marks that I actually had when I was working with this flat brush. I got comb-like marks that were very kind of structured. They're kind of equal and parallel to each other. But the comb-like marks I get when I'm pulling shapes with this Levinson brush, they're a lot more organic, natural. And so there's a beauty to that. I'm just going to scribble. Let's do it fast. Keep that freshness going. So I wanted to bring in another color. When I teach a travel painting workshop, sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of pressure on me to anticipate the needs of my students, to be fully present for every moment of the trip, and to communicate and articulate my skills and experiences in painting as clearly as possible, to offer feedback and critique, to celebrate my students and hear their stories. And in a sense, it can feel like I'm always on. And even though we're visiting some of the most beautiful places in the world, I'm still there to do a job, and I work very hard at it. But on my recent trip to Greece, during our 12 days there, I got a little glimpse of what it might feel like for my students to be a part of this painting adventure when we stepped onto a catamaran for an afternoon spent on the water. As we got on the catamaran and the boat left the dock, I had this sudden sense of kind of disorientation. For the next 6 hours or so, I had no responsibility other than to be present, to watch, to experience, to be a part of the group, and just to savor the magical memories we were making as we explored the coast of Santorini and watched the sunset. Nothing else was required of me, and it felt a little disconcerting at first, and then so free. As I've thought about and reflected on the trip and looked back at that feeling of unaccustomed freedom, I realized that this is the gift I get to give my students when we take a trip like this together. For the entire journey, they have the opportunity to create memories, to be fully present, and to celebrate the experience in art. And we get to do this together as friends and community with a richness that really does create lifelong memories. And that's worth so much to me. I'll be teaching and painting all over the world in 2025, and I invite you to join me. Come and find your own freedom, lifelong memories, and maybe create some friendships, build your watercolor skills, and discover what Art and Travel has for you. Tap the link in the description to find out more about my travel schedule for 2025. I'm painting in locations in the United States, Costa Rica, Greece, and Italy, and all levels of adventurous artists are invited. I'd love to have you. We're the luckiest people on the planet right now. With the lapis brown, there's an undertone of blue. You can see some of the texture coming here. There's a little hint of the blue here. And then I'm going to bring in some cobalt blue. And it's going to really look gorgeous with this lapis brown, having a little bit of blue to kind of echo the cool color that's inside of the mixture. the pigments that create lapis brown. Often with these self-evolving colors, you can mix them yourself. You can look at your palette, you can notice which colors kind of, you can mix them in a puddle together. Over here I've got a mixture of Venetian red and I think a cobalt blue. And as they start to dry, you start to see the colors want to separate out. And that's the same effect as you might get with the self-evolving colors. The only difference is this is more predictable. You don't have to mix it because it's pre-mixed for you. And that's the main difference. Sometimes there's different kind of pigment weights, so you'll get different results. This is Venetian red, just darkening my landscape in the foreground so it stays kind of foreground for us. I'm going to spatter a little bit. This brush, I don't spatter with it very often because the bristles are so long, they really slap around. Create some little grasses. And the Venetian red would actually look nice inside of the tree shape as well. It would, dropped in a cobalt blue to bring out some cool hues in the lapis brown. Dropping in a little bit of the Venetian red is going to draw out some warmth. Let's do, I've done a bunch of fine lines, but I feel like I'm missing some larger branches, some chunkier limbs. So I'm just going to drag upward with my brush, kind of change shape and curve the brush a little bit so I don't, and it's fun to kind of learn to play with your limb shapes. And I've really, in the recent months, I've really started liking to do kind of a more curvy, do a curved line, swoop it, you get different widths, rather than just doing straight lines or diagonals or whatever they are. Not all your branch shapes need to be connected. Pulling with your brush gives you a line that starts wide and gets lighter, thinner. And so that gives you a few options. I'm going to bring in my zoisite again. I'm wondering about doing a zoisite green gold mixture just to lighten the zoisite a tiny bit. And then bring in some more kind of intense greens. But I'm not sure what shape I want those greens to be. Let's try dragging through it with the Forte brush again. And then if you're dragging it with your brush and you find some of those lines look a little bit too, I don't know, dominant, you can soften with your paintbrush. I love with watercolor, you know, there's that ability to kind of soften. And it's interesting because I was looking at a watercolor or an oil painter's Instagram the other day, and he was commenting that he loves oil because it's the most blendable medium, and watercolor certainly has a time limit for how long it's blendable for, and so we are limited by, once it's dry, you're not doing a lot of blending. But I love the way we can really manipulate hard and soft edges with watercolor. I actually, until I saw that Instagram post, I would have said that there's just no way any other medium could have better qualities than watercolor. It's my medium. It's the one I love. And it's because I've dedicated my last almost 30 years to painting in watercolor. Didn't know that one day I'd be blink and 30 years would have passed, but here we are. I've just dropped in the lapis brown, and you know, I'm feeling like it needs something else, simply because it looks too much like the color I have in my tree trunk. I want to differentiate it a little bit, so we're going to drop in some more of that cobalt blue. Just get a shadow in behind the tree. And when you're placing two similar colors side by side like this, I think this is the last watercolor information or lesson I'm going to give you today. Look at the color that you're working beside. And if it seems warmer, if it seems quite warm, I can see a hint of the Venetian red in this color right here, then put a cooler color beside it. You can shift your colors just a hair so that you have, they don't just blend into each other. So I'm working with, maybe I want to play with my Venetian red and put some grasses, more grasses in. And the problem is I already have Venetian red on the page. Putting more Venetian red on isn't going to give me a lot of difference, you know, something that stands out. But I could say, this is Venetian red with a little bit of blue in it. If I added a little bit of yellow, say a raw sienna to my Venetian red, I'm warming it up, changing up my color temperature. And if I add in that raw sienna Venetian red combo, it's going to really have a warmth and a vibrancy that's going to look gorgeous beside cooler colors elsewhere. And so you get that opportunity to work with similar colors, but just tweak the warmth or coolness of it to contrast against the colors you're putting it alongside. And you're bringing in, even now where I've blended it here, it's still a patch of warmth. It's going to feel a little bit like sunlight landing on this part of the scene compared to over here where it's a little bit more shadowed. And so there's ways to work with those colors and have similar colors side by side without them being too matchy-matchy. So one more thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to call this finished, is I want to just create, I've got a foreground here with the warmth, I've got my tree, I've got my background here, which is getting a nice moody feel, and then I've started to just define a middle ground behind the tree with this shadow, and I'm going to carry that across, but not as a crisp line because that would be boring. But I'm just going to hint at it. So we're going to bring some of these greens, zoisite greens in. I've done that with quite a dry brush. And then with the damp brush, I'm just going to work with the blendability there. And have a little crisp and a little hard, a little variety. Something like that, I think. And yeah, it kind of works. I can pop in a hint of warm green gold if I want to. And yeah, that looks, I'm going to smudge it over here. It's going to have a gap where there's not as much green gold right there. And then we kind of come back to the green gold in here. Green gold is here, green gold is here, green gold over here. And there's a little bit of green gold over here. And that kind of brings us around the painting a little bit. And it's, I could be more intentional with that. This is just a sketch. And so it's a place to exercise some of the things we know about color theory, some of the things I know about shape and how I want a person to move through my painting. It's a chance to observe some colors and how they perform. The lapis brown is doing some really gorgeous things as it's flowed away from the tree, and that's happening over here and along here. The punch of cobalt blue has kind of helped that along as well. Always I look at my painting, I think about what's working, what's not working, i.e. what am I curious about, what is seeming like something I could maybe sharpen my skills at or try another variation. Sharpening our skills, we don't always get to be intentional about that. That kind of happens as we paint, but you can see things that you're seeing aren't working as well as you would like. This area feels flat to me. This area, the colors are kind of clashing with each other. You know, this area just feels like I was messing around and I didn't really know what direction to take my painting. When you see those things happening, you can choose in your next version, even if you're not sure what to do next, you can choose to try something else. And that, I think, is a huge benefit of a sketchbook practice, is that opportunity to say, I see what I did there. I'm not sure I like it. Let's fool around with it somewhere else. No one has to see this book. These pages don't ever have to come out. Maybe I just close it up and put it on a shelf when the book is full. But it is a testament to my investment in my artistic practice and my investment in my growth. I'm continuing to paint through World Watercolor Month with weekly blog posts on doodlewash.com, with these videos on YouTube once a week, links to all the resources I've mentioned, to the watercolor workshops that I'm teaching around the world in the coming year. All of that can be found in the description below the video. Also visit my website at angelafehr.com for more information on how I can help mentor you to growth as a developing artist seeking to find your own voice and style in watercolor or the medium of your choice.